listening to Smash the Bug podcast. We are recording this here on May 1st, May Day 2021. Now, we're going to be talking about some news first, and we're going to talk about problems on production. Now, you could probably say this is some of the most difficult, aggravating, painful problems that us as developers could have. So Jesse and I just capped off a week of some of those problems, and we're going to talk about exactly what we did, what we fought through, and a mistake that I made as well through that process. But first, you will find this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, I think Spotify as well. So if you look for a podcast, this Smash the Bug podcast, you will find it. Seek and you will find this podcast. So first, let's open up. Let's talk about some news. Jesse, this week just had two conferences, right? It was Adobe Summit and the Magento Association. I don't remember the name of it. Connect, was it? Magento Association Connect. Either way, it was great conferences. What do you want to share as far as maybe some of the bigger highlights from that?
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. It's great to be here, and it was a big week in the Magento, or now Adobe world. So what they were talking about is Adobe Commerce Payments, introducing a new system, a new offering for offering integrated payments in the Adobe Commerce, which was known as Magento ecosystem, which seems to fit the direction that they are moving of going towards microservices, basically componentizing their offering, moving a little bit away from having just a single big offering for everything that they have.
Yeah. And it makes sense. Again, I'm excited to see the value that Adobe is putting into the Magento platform. I know will be some pushback because, it's not, of course, for the open source. I don't even think what I've heard, it's not even like a availability for open source. And that could change. I could definitely see the payment side of that changing because, ultimately I'm guessing I haven't specifically heard, but I'm guessing, and I could have missed this, of course, that the payments is kind of like Shopify, where they're skimming 0.25% or 0.5% of the order value. Again, with the typical payment processing fees, which again, in my understanding, that's how I think Shopify makes well over half of their money is through those payment fees. Which, hey, again, you have put $1.5 billion investment into something. Why not actually make it up with new value additions?
Absolutely. And it makes sense for a company like Adobe to invest because they can invest in a single place and then other merchants can use that and benefit from that and not have to rebuild through this pain point that a lot of merchants have to work through and figure out.
And payments are a big pain point. I mean, they really are. I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago, and they were using this custom authorized.net system, and it was skipping orders, and that's a pain.
That's not cool.
No, it is not cool. And there's just over and over payments is one of the most difficult parts of the whole ecosystem. And so if they can come up with a one-stop solution that pretty much solves all payment problems, kudos to them. And I'm sure a lot of merchants would be willing to pay 0.25% for something like that. So yeah, I'll be very excited. I'll be very interested to see how it comes out. I just hope it is available also for open source as well. That is what, and again, I could be wrong. Maybe it is available and I just missed the announcement on that. So
that would be awesome. I agree. I think that would be huge if they did decide to go that direction. Perhaps they're just going to pilot it on Adobe Commerce first and look at open source or just release them both. But I agree. That would be really significant. And payments, it is a never-ending cycle of security that's necessary to keep up with what the bad actors are working on and trying to stay ahead of them. And there's so much money there for people who don't have the best intentions.
North Korea.
Yeah.
they're one of the bigger ones. And being up against state bad actors is very, very difficult for merchants. And they're smart people. They can do some serious damage. And not only just the bad actors, but the legal ramifications too, right?
That's for sure.
So you have these, in Europe, with the version 2, oh man, that's skipping my mind too, of the secure payment portals. That also, it caused a lot of challenges in the industry, which, it's more secure, so it's good, but hopefully if it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. So that enough with that. But I think the other aspect is the Adobe Commerce Search.
Yeah.
So I think it was last year they released the Adobe Sensei powered product recommendations, and it's really powerful. And I think it's a great platform, and it's exciting to see them continue to build on that now with search.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited about this. I think that using artificial intelligence to refine search results or product recommendations on multiple levels and in a store is a very beneficial thing.
Absolutely.
And that will serve a lot of merchants very well with that. And people are getting used to that. I mean, we're used to that at a search engine level with Google or Bing or other places like that get used to what we search for or even who we are, and then make recommendations or maybe prioritize content based off of that. And so I think at a store level, that's really fantastic.
Yeah, and again, the existing Magento Elasticsearch integration is not bad. We definitely have some problems with it as we're working through right now for one of our merchants. But ultimately, Algolia is who we usually use as a substitute or replacement for that. It's just far better. And so I'll be curious to see the quality and the speed ultimately of the Algolia results versus Adobe Commerce Search. But I'm guessing what I understand, though, is Adobe Commerce Search is built in, and it might even be free, like no upcharges, like the B2B module for Adobe Commerce is an upcharge. I'll be curious to see how this ends up with Search. But if it's free and just as fast, although it's going to be really hard to beat Algolia's speed. Algolia is crazy fast. So,
it zips right along, and it gives good results too.
Yeah,
like basically anything you search for is pulling up good results, and it's smart and works well.
Yes.
Will Adobe Commerce Search be able to keep up with that?
Quick plug for Algolia. Yeah, absolutely. So
that's right.
We'll see, but I'll be very curious to see how that plays out as well. So that's the news. Lot to watch. It's not necessarily immediately impactful, but definitely something for us as agencies, as developers, as we're interacting with merchants who are using Magento Commerce to start sowing those seeds of the additional value that is coming with their licensing fees to Adobe for Adobe Commerce. Again, may the name Magento rest in peace for many years to come, because it will never just be deceased, but it will always be with us, even though Adobe Commerce is the new name.
Yeah, I was thinking it's probably going to be like Varian for those who worked on Magento 1. And go. That Varian name just was always there. There's always that Varian class somewhere in there. And so that might be Magento here in a couple of years, where it's like, oh yeah, that namespace.
Yes. Oh, one thing I gotta call out before we go into our next section, speaking of news, right here I hold in my hands the proof for our upcoming book, The Art of E-Commerce Debugging, and I am super excited. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see some of the previews. Look, we went so far as to actually put comics in here. So it's a fun, easy to read book. I am super excited about it. Hopefully July 1 is kind of what we're working towards. So we will see if we get it out by July 1. I'm pretty confident we will. So, but I am so excited about that. I think it's going to be revolutionary for developers, solving one of the greatest and most difficult problems that we as developers face, and that's solving problems.
Absolutely, which is what we're talking about here on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I love about the book, is it kind of like brings all of these things together in one place that's easy to read, that's engaging, that's fun, and we can't wait to get it out.
Yeah, I'm so excited. All right, so let's talk about problems with production.
That's like the worst place to have problems, by the way. I'll just drop that in there.
That's a profound statement.
I'd much rather have it locally or something.
Well,
like that.
Yeah, exactly. I know, because, man, when you got a problem on production, that means that very likely, and when I am saying problem with production, that means it checked out well on local. That means it checked out on dev, and now we got a problem with production. How do we troubleshoot this, Jesse? We fought through this on a couple times actually this week. So
yeah, it was an interesting week from that perspective, just because of these situations where we had everything working well locally, everything working perfectly on staging, and then we release it and like, what in the world happened? Just like you were saying. And then it's like, okay, what do we do? Because there's probably customers affected in some way, on some level. I mean, it's one thing to take a site down for 10 or 15 minutes to do an upgrade. for Magento 2.4, which is one of the things that we were doing. Exactly. Early morning, hopefully nobody was really affected with that. But then what happens after that? Like for instance, in my case, I was working on an upgrade, and a lot of the initial steps went fairly well.
Now, the upgrade being from Magento 2.3.6, I think, to Magento 2.4.1.
Yes, something like that. And in this case, this site was also running a point of sale that was pretty complicated and been pretty customized too. And I wouldn't say that the original code was the best quality, so it's a little bit of an interesting upgrade path. Yes. So that was one of the biggest things that I was concerned about going into the upgrade. But overall, the upgrade went well. Like, at least it seemed to. The site was down for maybe 10 minutes or something like that, going through the upgrade, just making sure that everything cleared out right. It may have actually been less than that. But
and again, it was off hours, so you were the one that handled that. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning, I think, right? 6:30, something like that.
Yep. So getting in at a time when traffic was low and everything like that. But then I go through and I find the checkout. It's blank. Like, wait a minute. It worked just great on staging, and here the checkout is blank. Like, what to do about that? So working on an environment where we actually had access to the production. So the file system was editable on production, but there was auto-scaling was enabled, which means that the code is essentially replicated to other nodes or servers. And that means if you make a change in one place, there's some other steps that I had to take in order to get them to the other places. The problem was that command line, that command that I was running wasn't actually working. And so I would go in there, I was like, what would I do to try to find the issue here? Because the page is just blank. So I went in.
And to back up, I think, so going to the checkout page, the actual, the header and the footer were there, right?
Yes.
So it was just the middle part. It was like literally the UI components was missing, right?
Yes, it was a single template that I identified that was missing. The one page.html for those Magento gurus out there that would care.
Yeah.
That was the only template that was missing. So the rest of the page is rendering fine. We're not looking at a 500 error, which would indicate that PHP had exploded on us.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I still checked the standard places. I still like, okay, is there anything in the logs that would be interesting? And I think one thing that Magento is notorious for is those sorts of template-based problems, because there's not real great logging there. And so I was not at all surprised to not find errors in the logs, to be honest.
Well, I recently had an issue in the log, and there was something that appeared in the logs, but it was just basically there's something about a block template error. I mean, that's literally all that was logged in, like, I think it was system.log. Did you have that in yours? Was there any logs whatsoever?
No, there was no indication whatsoever of the problem, at least that I saw. In looking through the standard Magento, there's 3 Magento logs, and then the server log as well. Okay. I didn't see anything along those lines in there.
Okay.
So those logs were pretty clean. And I'm like, okay, so I'm missing a template. So I turned on template path hints, even on production.
Okay.
Tried to keep it short, but did do that. And that's where I identified that, okay, we have a whole template that's missing here. So what I did was I opened up that template, and there's 2 lines in there that I recognized as having a lot of configuration.
If I could stop you again, how did you find out that one template was missing? So did the logs, did the template path template hints show you that there was this one-page block that was showing, but there was no one-page.html that was showing inside of that?
That's a good question. It did not, but I did turn it on staging as well.
Okay.
And so I can compare
vanilla. Great.
The staging environment. I could have done it locally as well. I just did it on staging anyways, because I had that up there. So I did see it there, but I also could recognize that the one-page.html is kind of that linchpin of that page. And so I recognized that as not being a part of it, and that was as significant as anything.
Yeah. Okay.
So jumped in there, and then those 2 lines that had configuration in them, I was like, oh, okay, these are probably what's bringing down the template. Yeah. So I comment them out, I save the file, I run the command to rescale the instances, and nothing changes.
I know where this is going, yep.
So I try stepping through all sorts of things, as we talk about in the TAD framework. I back up multiple times, I revisit, I think through, okay, what else could there be? Turns out the problem was the auto-scaling. Like, the changes to the files weren't actually going through.
Oh, wow.
And I missed it early on, and I couldn't believe it. So I spent quite a while, half hour or something like that, tracing down these different paths. And actually, in the first case, I was on the right track.
Okay, good.
That very first thing that I did was the right track.
Good for you.
But I missed it because of the auto scaling. And that was the problem.
Shame on the auto scaling.
I know. But I should have also taken some steps to make sure that the changes that I was making actually were going to show up. Like making a change to another template that I knew was already working.
Yeah.
And adding some text to there, and then rerunning things and making sure that things worked. Mm-hmm. But what I ended up doing was disabling auto scaling. And then that almost immediately allowed me to narrow the problem in to something that surprised me and was actually a little bit annoying. Because it turns out that for whatever reason, some of the encrypted keys in the database are corrupted from the Magento 2.3 up to the Magento 2.4. They become corrupted. And the reCAPTCHA keys were that one. And so for some reason, having a corrupted reCAPTCHA key in that template broke it.
Here's what I think happened. It breaks the JSON encode because there's characters that cannot be encoded. It breaks it, and then ultimately it just returns an empty value. But I don't know, was it breaking would that have broken the entire template, or was that just breaking that? Is the window dot? No, that's not that's just where it renders the layout, the UI component layout.
Yeah, so it basically breaks the entire template,
nice.
Practically speaking. So that template doesn't show up at all. Nothing from that template shows up in view source or anywhere on the page. Wow. It's just gone when you don't have those reCAPTCHA keys right. And the part that really got me was the fact that I knew that reCAPTCHA was a problem. So had I just gone in and fixed that first, it would have gone away. It would have solved itself. It would have solved itself. And I thought of that sometimes. It's like, sometimes it's not a bad idea to go fix the problem that you know is a problem, and then step back and troubleshoot the other things.
Yeah, as we were talking about that, Jesse, one thing that stood out to me is another thing that you could have done is to go for just a local replication right away. But obviously that would have taken some time. You would have had to download the database, made sure it was at least somewhat sanitized, loaded it in, and I think that takes at least 10 to 15 minutes right there. Yeah. But that would have also allowed you to caught that, and then you would have had Xdebug at the same time. But it's really, really hard when you're dealing with a production. And that's the value of in the TAD framework. TAD framework is a 3-letter acronym. Take an inventory, attempt a fix, and then the final step is do it again. That's where you step back, you take a retrospective. It's kind of like this is kind of like an agile framework for debugging, where you step back, take a look and say, okay, what progress did I make? Do I need to take a different approach to this? And that would be where you would say, okay, should I try for a local replication, or should I keep pushing here on the server? And it's very difficult to make those decisions sometimes if you do have that server access, which obviously in this case we did. Yeah. Because maybe I'm going to get fixed in the next cycle, and maybe it's going to be wasting time. Again, we have a production outage here. Maybe it's going to waste time to get to do local replication instead of just pushing through on the production. So again, those decisions are very difficult to make.
They are difficult to make because one of the things that I tend to do is work from easiest to hardest.
That is not a 10 thing, that is a good thing.
Yeah. So I try to look for what's easiest to fix, or what things that I can try to identify first. Yep. And then look at those things. And so for that 10 to 15 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes to get the local replication, it's like, okay, that stacks it up as a more time-intensive thing for me to do, which automatically puts it a little bit later. Even in these cases, it would be good to do that one a little bit sooner because I have so much better access. And I think it would be a faster or easier idea for production environments where you don't have access to the actual file system.
Oh yeah, immediately. And just as a thought is, you can work in production. You can start on production, keep working, keep doing the TAD cycle, but as well, you kick off the database export. You start the SCP down. You start loading it into your local database. And all that can be done somewhat in tandem too, especially for those emergencies.
That's true. That's a great idea. And I think even that would be good for avoiding tunnel vision, which is something that I have to kind of like consciously work to stay out of. And it's so easy to like get panicked and worked up and like, oh, there's a problem here that I want to fix right away. But no, it's just slow it down, back up, okay, relax, and work on these things, because as soon as you introduce another thing, it does help with tunnel vision, but it can also increase the noise.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Like that mental noise where you're like, okay, now I've got 5 irons in the fire. What do I do with these things here?
Oh yeah, we're trying to solve 3 problems at once. Yeah, that's good. And again, you see, we're sharing the real life stories that we dealt with this week. I mean, it was what, Wednesday morning?
Yeah. Yep. Wednesday morning.
Midweek.
Hump day.
It was a great hump day.
It sure was.
I remember that. That upgrade, of course, did not go perfectly as we hoped it would. We're dealing with some weird issues, and I was working on that Friday with some indexing. The category, the products would just disappear and kind of slowly come back through the course of time. And so there was an idea I had in solving that. Actually, let me just put it this way. Back on Magento 2.3, we had some problems with the index on schedule working as expected. It would, I think there was some issues with the host here, and stuff was not, I for sure know some cron jobs were missed, and the index by schedule was normally triggered by cron jobs, so I actually moved that into a separate script along that triggers some other stuff that ran every minute. So it was kind of moving the index on schedule to the side, but it was still making sure that to ensure that it ran. As such, I was kind of wondering if that was causing some problems. So not 100% sure, but that was another issue. But I got to talk about, we're still on checkout, a big mistake that I made. And I think it brings up the topic of what do we do when we make a mistake?
Yeah, it's a great question.
And how we respond to this. Mistakes keep me up at night, and that's one of the biggest things I greatly dislike about this is the fact that I do make mistakes. Some people say, how was your day at work? And often what my response to not Jesse but other people is, well, I'll know in about 3 months. Well, in this case, I knew the next day. And what happened was again on this same website, and looking through no, that's right. It was memory limit issues that we were having. Memory limit. We were starting to see some errors in the logs of this allowed memory limit is being maxed out. Well, how do you troubleshoot that? There's no stack trace. One thing I did do was I triangulated it. I saw the PHP FPM error logs that said allowed memory limits, and then I saw in the HTTP log, access logs, I could see the exact request. So it was saying, okay, it was this category or that category. It was just a category. Magento 2.3, we weren't having those issues. Now we go up to 2.4 and we start having those issues. Ultimately,
that's strange. I'm curious if you attempted to change the memory first. Memory limit.
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I did some troubleshooting first. I did eventually get the host involved.
Okay.
But
yep.
I did not because I was thinking, what did we do? Because ultimately, the Magento site saved this, or this hosting stayed the same.
Right.
So, but now that we're having memory limit violations, that would seem to me to indicate that it's our problem, not the host problem.
Yeah, which is a great way to think about it, because I think that a lot of people's natural response would be, oh, the memory limit is too low. Let's change it up.
Yeah.
And that's not always a bad solution.
But it can be a Band-Aid. And that's why I resisted it, because I felt like it was a Band-Aid. Ultimately, I did succumb, and I did involve the host company, and they said, oh, yes, the memory limit is 2 gig. Let's bump it up to 4 gig. A lot of people like it at 4 gig. Great, let's do that. And they also found that there was some misconfiguration as well. It's just a wonderful hosting company to work with. So that to say, while I was working at those problems, I noticed an error in the logs. And that was basically that the Braintree merchant ID was not set. Well, this merchant is using authorized.net. Why are we having these entries in the log files? I don't know. Maybe it's every time a person hit the checkout, there was some time that this was happening. And so I was like, well, hey, I'm just going to go disable that module, the Braintree module. And to be frank, it's a dumb idea, and I've done it in the past. We've tested things out. It's worked great. And so I built up some confidence, and you might say some shaky confidence, but I've built up some confidence that it works. So I did it again. I disabled the PayPal Braintree and the PayPal Braintree GraphQL modules. I sure thought I cleared the cache. I thought I re-initted the auto scaling. and everything seemed good.
And just to put some context on here, but not to rub it in, this was like end of day Friday, right?
This is end of day Thursday.
End of day Thursday.
End of day Thursday.
Okay, so getting close to the end of the week.
I'm still working. I work till 6 o'clock.
Yeah, you got an hour left in the tank.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's all good. And the next morning, you see a ticket show up in my inbox. Checkout is broken. I'm like, oh man, checkout is broken. What could have broken it? I looked at the log files and I immediately see something having to do with PayPal breach. I'm like, what? I'm stopping myself short here, like as far as expressions, but like, what happened? And I was just dumbfounded. I looked back at their logs, and sure, they have a few orders that usually trickle in overnight. And sure enough, 9 o'clock to that very moment, there was not a single order that had been placed. I was really distraught. So I immediately re-enabled it, reinitialized the auto scaling, cleared the cache, tested out. Yep, sure, it came back up. And first, I did check to make sure that it was broken. So the question is, first, I learned my lesson. Okay, we are not making that type of change in production anymore. Even based off my past experience, it works just fine. Can't always rely on your past experience. That is a bane of being a senior developer, is that past experience, while it's usually good, can get you into problems.
Yep. And one of those are the big letdown moments of, oh no.
Yes.
You just feel rough.
Oh, it was one of those sick moments. Oh man, I just hate it. So I then ended up, I told the merchant, here, I'm working on this. When I first saw this, immediately I told them I was working on this. I told them that it was back up, and then I went back through, tried to reconstruct exactly what happened. I could see no other reason for what happened other than what I did. And I think here's the important part. It's easy to say, I apologize for the inconvenience. I think all of us have heard that a million times on these support calls when we're talking to somebody, and they say, I apologize for the inconvenience. But I think it means more to merchants when we say, I screwed up. Number one, I messed up here. This was my fault. But second, here is what I'm doing to ensure this never happens again.
Yeah.
And yes, I learned my lesson. That's something that I will not be doing and relying on in the future. And again, we're being honest, transparent here, sharing our mistakes.
Which is good on a personal level too, right? Like saying, maybe I messed up in our relationship or something like that, and then here's how I'm going to make it right.
Absolutely.
And so it's that same sort of thing, because we're working with people, our clients, right? They're not, sometimes we get stuck in the fact that it's computers that we're working with, but really we're working with people.
You're right, yeah.
And so going that extra mile to make a true apology when there is a mistake that's made. We don't want to go too far. We don't want to apologize for every little thing that goes wrong. But when there is something that truly goes wrong, it's a really good thing to do that.
And it meant the world to me. Yesterday I got an email from this merchant, and at the end they said, thanks for all your hard work and what you guys are doing. And I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And what I hear over and over again, it's when we're gonna make mistakes and we're gonna do dumb things. We're gonna do things we shouldn't have done. But it's when we own up to that, when we fix it, and when we show the resolution, show how we're not going to, what we're putting in place to ensure this doesn't happen again, it means a lot to people, and we get grace as a result, as opposed to trying to pass the buck, pass the blame. It wasn't our fault, or just try to gloss it over. Hey, yep, checkout is fixed again, all good now. The merchants are like, but what happened, right? And because again, this is a big deal. This is a really big deal, and so. That was a good lesson learned this week, and
I love the things that you bring out in that. One is communication, the importance of communication, even on a team when you're working with somebody else and trying to troubleshoot a problem, but they're the ones that are like responsible for it.
Yeah.
And like giving them updates like every 20 minutes or something like that, like frequent, like this is where I'm at on this. But in your case, also doing that with the client. So whoever is interacting with the client, making sure that gets back to them in these sorts of critical incidents.
Yes.
I love the way that you did that, and then also do that postmortem, like looking back. Okay, what really happened? Because it's easy for us to kind of like, oh, it's fixed now. Let's move on with life. This is one of those things we don't really want to remember, actually.
Especially if it was one of our mistakes. It's like, okay, we're just going to if you're listening to this, I was trying to crawl under the table. Just kind of brush under the table and be done with it, be on with it. But that just doesn't work.
Exactly. Yep. And so taking that time to go back and look at, okay, what caused the problem and what are the steps that we can make to avoid having the same problem in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. So that was my learning of this week. It was painful. But I think we're about out of time now as it is. But yeah, this is good stuff. You'll see I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And again, this is why I believe this ongoing work is so important to the training endeavors that we're doing. As we want to equip you to be a great Magento developer, commerce developer, is we maintain our relevancy. We're still making mistakes. We are still working on difficult challenges on a weekly basis. And we want to share that with you, to inspire you, to give you advice as far as where you can go, where you can take this, and how you can be a great developer yourself. Very good. Well, I think let's go ahead and we can wrap it up. There's a lot we'll be talking about hopefully next week on our next episode. And boy, we've got a lot coming up. I was just running Jesse through some of the phenomenally great folks that are coming on this podcast. And I'm really excited. It's going to be some super, super powerful stuff. I hope that you found this helpful and beneficial. If you did, certainly give it, if you're watching this on YouTube, a like. Make sure to subscribe to our channel too. We always could use an extra subscriber or two. But hate for you to miss out on future episodes. As I said, the ones coming up are going to be fantastic. We are found on YouTube and Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all of them. We are found there. And please, if you did enjoy this, a review would also make both of our days. We would love a 5-star review. So thank you for watching. It was a pleasure to have you here. Hope you have a wonderful week.